I just released 80 of them. 80 carnivorous fish swimming in my heated pool. I set the water temperature to climb slowly, degree by degree. Then, I dropped $1,000 on 3 golden pythons. I paid a premium to have them raised right under the floorboards. I even hid a razor-sharp knife beneath the cushions of the patio bed, right next to a swarm of 100 hairy black centipedes. Once the traps were set, I got ready to head out. I'm off to celebrate the new year while I wait for my ex-girlfriend to come crawling back. I can already hear her pounding on my door. In my past life, she waited until I left for my hometown for the holidays. Then she moved her entire family into my house without asking. They treated my home like their own personal party palace. They didn't just sleep in my bed, they trashed it. They raided my cellar and gulped down my most expensive vintage wines. Her 2 nephews even smashed the limited edition figurines I kept in my study, the ones I spent years collecting. When I demanded they pay for the damage, my ex-girlfriend live-streamed her suicide to manipulate me. She painted me as a monster who drove her to death over a few toys. The internet mob believed her lies and made my life a living hell. Because of that, they destroyed my company and stripped me of everything. They pelted me with rotten eggs while I was crossing the street, causing a scene for the police. I couldn't even stand my ground. I was struck head-on by a car. It was coming at full speed, and the impact sent me back through time to reincarnate. Right back to the moment it all began. I officially broke up with my ex-girlfriend. I moved every single one of my figurines to another one of my properties. I did it all under the cover of night. Then, I released a swarm of piranhas into the patio pond. I also brought in a massive python and a collection of hairy black spiders. I left them a little surprise waiting in the study, and I placed a very specific sign on the front door. A clear warning, caution, dangerous pets inside, do not enter. But I know she won't be able to resist picking the lock. She's desperate to force her way in and live there. This villa is worth tens of millions of dollars. It's more than enough for her to brag about for a while, so if she wants to celebrate New Year's at my place, let her. I'll make sure it's a new year she'll never forget. Wang Gao, why did you change the password to your house? I watched as Song Jun finally tracked me down right in front of my house. It had been 20 days since our breakup. The reason we ended things was simple. She went behind my back. She was checking into hotels with other men while I wasn't looking. I used to think she was just bold. I never expected her to be this shameless. What is she even doing at my house after everything that happened? Fortunately, I changed the security code early. Otherwise, she probably would have forced her way inside already. I looked her in the eye and said, "We're broken up. Of course I'm going to change the password. You aren't welcome here, and you don't deserve to step foot in my house again. I find you disgusting," I added, my patience wearing thin. If she had even an ounce of self-respect, she would turn around and leave right now, but I know her better than that. Right now, I just want to provoke her. "Wang Dao, we had a life together," she cried. "How can you be so cruel? That man turned out to have a wife anyway. I'm already done with him. I already promised my sister and my 2 nephews I'd bring them here for New Year's. Now I don't even have a place to live, and you're just going back to your hometown anyway. It's empty anyway. Can't I just bring my whole family to stay here for New Year's?" Song Jun had been to my place before and knew the deal. My villa looks ordinary on the outside, but the interior is pure luxury. It's packed with smart appliances and a storage room overflowing with food. I could eat and drink like a king without leaving until the middle of next month. "I don't give a damn if you have nowhere to live," I snapped back. "Your whole family could rot in the street for all I care. It has nothing to do with me. You are not welcome here." I shoved her aside and stepped inside, slamming the door in her face. I watched her through the video intercom. Song Jun's fake, flattering act vanished instantly. She spat viciously at my door, her eyes twisting into something unrecognizable. She looked arrogant, as if she was the one doing me a favor by negotiating. "Once you head back to your hometown, I'm breaking that lock," she muttered. "This house, I'm moving in whether you like it or not." Seeing that smug expression on her face made me smile, not out of anger, but out of pure, cold excitement. I knew exactly what was coming next. In my past life, she made this exact same scene, and I rejected her then too. I thought she'd just give up, so I packed my gear and left for my hometown. I left for my hometown 2 days later. The moment Song Jun saw me leave, she tracked down a locksmith from her village. She brought him over to help her with her little plan. They forced the lock, and then she did the unthinkable. She moved her entire family into my house without a shred of shame. Whenever the neighbors asked, she told them she was my girlfriend. She claimed we were back together and that I'd given her my blessing to stay. The neighbors had seen her around me before, so they didn't doubt her. They stood by and watched as her whole family made themselves at home in my villa. Song Jun is as stupid as she is greedy. The second she moved in, she didn't just empty my storage room. She treated it like a jackpot. She raided my cellar and drank every bottle of fine wine I'd been aging for years. She cleaned out every bit of premium food from the fridge to feed her family. Then, she started secretly selling off the luxury items from my walk-in closet. Her sister even caught and stewed the 9 priceless koi fish from my pond. But that wasn't even the worst part. Her 2 nephews broke into my studio and smashed my entire collection of figures. Most of those pieces were limited editions that are now out of print. I had spent years hunting them down, and they were worth millions. They weren't just toys. They were the result of a lifetime of effort. I didn't find out until I came back home, happy after the new year. That's when I discovered they had been living in my house the whole time. I called the police immediately. I demanded they compensate me for my losses, but Song Jun and her divorced sister were broke. With 2 kids to feed, they didn't have a cent to pay me back. They threw a massive tantrum and started playing the victim. They looked right into the security cameras and made a scene. They screamed that they'd rather die than give me any money. Song Jun tried one last desperate move to guilt-trip me. She tried to force me to drop the charges and forgive their mistakes. She even tried to fake a suicide on a live stream in front of my house at midnight. But she cut too deep, and she actually died right there on my doorstep. The internet was flooded with misinformation, and the mob turned on me. Angry strangers tracked down my company and trashed the place. Someone pelted me with rotten eggs while I was crossing the street. I was blinded and disoriented in the middle of the road. I couldn't dodge out of the way in time. A speeding car slammed into me at full force. I landed in a flower bed with every bone in my body shattered. By the time the ambulance arrived, I was seizing and bleeding out in the dirt. I managed to reach the hospital just before I stopped breathing. I felt nothing but pure hatred for Song Jun's entire family and their lethal greed. But when I finally opened my eyes again, I realized I had returned to the time before the new year. They hadn't broken into my house yet, and I hadn't left for my hometown. This time, I'm going to have a little fun with them. They want to spend the new year in my house so badly. Fine, I'll give them a New Year's celebration that they will never forget. That night, I called my friends to help move my expensive koi fish. I moved them all to a friend's villa for safekeeping. Those fish alone were worth over $2 million. There was no way I was letting Song Jun's family ruin my life again. Not over a few fish. With the koi gone, the pond looked empty and neglected. So I called a contact at the aquarium to find me something fierce. I told him I wanted to raise some dangerous beasts for a change. Early the next morning, a large delivery arrived at my door. Inside was a massive crate filled with starving piranhas and 2 giant, aggressive snapping turtles. My friend gave me a warning. Pour the piranhas into the pond first. Then I'll help you cover the surface with floating aquatic plants. That way, they won't scare anyone inside the house. These things are vicious. If they smell blood, they'll strip a cat bare. In an instant, there's nothing left but white bone. And those snapping turtles are mean. You'd better not fall in. I had them placed in a large water tank in my backyard. They can survive until spring without eating or drinking a drop. I felt a cold sense of satisfaction and asked if he had any reptiles to recommend. You're not going to be home for New Year's? Trying to keep the burglars out. My friend caught on instantly and asked, how about a corn snake? It's not venomous, but it's massive, so it'll scare the hell out of people. I've got spiders too. Big, non-venomous black ones. I have a buddy who breeds over 1 million reptiles. He has too many to handle. Want me to bring them by this afternoon? I nodded. But I wasn't stopping there. I also hired a professional moving company. I ordered them to pack up every single collectible figure, clearing out my entire studio and moving them to my other house for storage. I wasn't letting those 2 nephews touch them. Then, I had them pack every other luxury item, including my entire collection of high-end designer goods. I even cleared out the luxury items and several antique vases from the living room. The place looked too empty, so I bought some potted flowers to fill the space. Are they poisonous? Maybe. I scattered them all throughout the house. Next, I replaced every single toiletry in the bathrooms. I swapped them for products that had expired years ago. I didn't stop there. I went for the wine cellar next. I filled the racks with cheap knockoffs and fake labels. Then I moved to the kitchen and tossed the high-end frozen seafood. I replaced it all with rotten fish and spoiled shrimp. Since they love seafood so much, they can eat until they're full. Before leaving, I called a technician to set up my computer system. I had him install over 10 hidden cameras to monitor every inch of the house. I needed every bit of evidence for the police once the trap was sprung. With everything ready, I slowly dragged my luggage toward the exit. I opened the door and slapped a custom metal sign onto the front gate. It read, "Dangerous animals inside. Do not enter without authorization. Enter at your own risk. Owner is not responsible for any consequences. If an accident happens to them, my hands are clean." After all, I gave them a fair warning. But I know Sun Yun. She won't be able to resist the urge to live in a villa and drive luxury cars. She's desperate to feel like someone important. So after leaving, I dragged my luggage straight to the station. I boarded the high-speed train immediately. Once I was settled in my seat, I opened the surveillance window on my phone. I had a clear view of every single corner of the house, including the front gate, but at first, everything was silent. I started to wonder, did my rebirth change the timeline for her family too? Is Sun Yun not coming today? Was everything I prepared just a waste of time? But then I thought, if Sun Yun actually regrets her mistakes in this life, and she chooses not to break into my house, then maybe my revenge doesn't need to continue. I could just start a brand new life right now. As long as she doesn't provoke me, I'm happy to stay out of her way. I don't actually want to end anyone's life if I don't have to. She could go on living her own life, and I would live mine. I was even starting to think about how I'd have to go back to deal with all those spiders and snakes I planted. And that pond full of piranhas. I couldn't just let those animals starve to death. I didn't really want to scare anyone if they weren't guilty. However, right after I finished my lunch, I checked the monitoring room again and saw a change. Sun Yun didn't disappoint me. She showed up with a locksmith from her own village. And then, right under her instructions, after charging her a few hundred yuan, he quickly forced open the front door of my house. Once Sun Yun stepped inside and saw how clean and perfect everything was, She was overcome with joy. She handed the locksmith another 500 yuan to change the locks. He immediately replaced my high-tech fingerprint lock with a cheap, low-quality one. She even used a knife to pry off the warning sign hanging on the gate. She ripped it down and tossed it carelessly into the nearby drainage ditch. Every single move she made was captured perfectly by the camera under the eaves. As soon as the locksmith left, she rushed straight to the storage room. She saw the wine cellar was fully stocked and the freezer was packed with food. She burst out laughing with pure greed. Inside, she thought, when my sisters come to celebrate the new year, they'll feast like royalty. Muttering to herself, she walked back into the living room. She cranked up the floor heating for the entire house. Then she flopped onto the sofa and started watching my TV. She was making herself right at home in my house. 2 hours later, she was supposed to pick up her sister and her 2 nephews. I was also just about to reach my destination. I closed the surveillance video on my phone. I grabbed my luggage, stepped off the high-speed train, and followed the crowd toward the exit. The station was packed with passengers heading home for the new year. Everyone was carrying bags and boxes of holiday gifts. The festive atmosphere actually made me feel relaxed for the entire trip. My brother met me at the station, bringing a down jacket because he was worried I'd be cold. That good mood lasted all the way until I got back to my family home. I lay down on my old bed, pulled out my phone, and opened the monitoring app again. On the screen, Sun Yun had already brought her guests back. Her sister, Sun Huan, was there with her children. That included her particularly bratty nephew, Sun Gilly. The moment Sun Huan stepped inside, she started gushing over how luxurious my house was. Sun Yun acted proud, claiming that as long as she stayed there, I'd eventually have to forgive her. She actually thought that by squatting in my house, we would somehow reconcile. Sun Huan didn't see anything wrong with breaking in. She even started giving her sister despicable ideas. When he gets back, just sleep with him and get pregnant, even if the kid is someone else's. Once you trick him, you'll be family, and this villa will be yours, she said, and Sun Yun eagerly agreed. Sister, you're so smart, Sun Yun chirped. No wonder you got 5 million in the divorce. Seeing there were no strangers around, Sun Huan leaned in to whisper a massive secret to Sun Yun. My ex-husband actually believes those twins are his, she hissed. She explained that even after their real father died, she kept the lie going to secure the bag. Now, her ex-husband pays at least 20,000 a month in child support for kids that aren't his. In reality, the father was some thug she used to date before the marriage. Apparently, her family has a history of twins, making the deception even easier to pull off. I watched the screen, disgusted by Sun Huan's twisted tactics. She was cold enough to play her ex-husband for years without blinking. I immediately hit the download button on that security camera footage. Then, I messaged a friend to help me dig up some info. I needed to find out exactly who Sun Huan's ex-husband was. I planned to send him this video as a little gift. It was time to stop him from being a fool and let him see the truth. While the 2 sisters were busy gossiping like vultures, they weren't paying any attention to the kids. Sun Gilly ran out to the backyard to find something to mess with. His eyes landed on my prized possession in the garden pond. My caiman turtle. He reached his hand right into the water. My heart skipped a beat as I watched him through the screen. Turtles usually hibernate in winter, but in this city, it's eternal spring. Turtles around here don't hibernate, and caiman turtles are naturally ferocious. But the kid got lucky, probably because the turtle had just arrived at my house, and it hadn't fully adapted to its new environment yet, so it didn't bite down immediately. Sun Gilly stared at the massive monster in the tank and got even more excited. He kept reaching out to poke it until, finally, the little brat got what was coming. Sun Gilly screamed at the top of his lungs. My hand. Mom, save me. I leaned in closer, but the security camera was too far away to see everything. I couldn't make out the details, only vague, frantic movements on the screen. Sun Yun and Sun Huan came sprinting out to the backyard pond. Sun Huan took one look at the water turning red and lost it. She fainted right there on the spot from pure shock. Sun Yun was a bit braver, but the pond basin was too heavy for her to tip over. She had to grit her teeth and reach into the water to grab the turtle herself. The caiman turtle was clamped onto the back of Sun Gilly's hand like a vice. As she pulled it to the surface, the beast started thrashing wildly. It began clawing at Sun Yun's hands with everything it had. Its claws were razor-sharp and relentless. Bloody gashes quickly opened up all over her skin. She was bleeding out, but the real nightmare was the turtle's jaw. The more it panicked, the harder it bit into Sun Gilly, who was howling in agony. Auntie, it hurts so much, save me, Sun Gilly wailed while Sun Yun froze. She didn't dare call the police or an ambulance because she was trespassing. To save the brat, she ran to the kitchen and grabbed a knife to decapitate the turtle. Right at that exact moment, I dialed her phone. I needed to buy time, and when she saw my name on the screen, she panicked. She was terrified of being caught, so she ignored Sun Gilly's screams and answered. She was panting heavily into the receiver. Why are you calling me now, she hissed. I frowned and threw out my excuse. My neighbor said they saw you lurking near my house. You better not be doing anything suspicious, or I'll make you regret it. Sun Yun broke into a cold sweat, her voice trembling with fear. No way, your neighbor must be mistaken. I have to go, I'm busy. She was clearly thinking, if the neighbor saw me, I need to get out of here. She realized her plan to spend New Year's in my house was falling apart. When she finally hung up and turned back to Sun Gilly, the struggle ended. The caiman turtle finally let go of its prey, but it didn't just release him. It tore a massive chunk of flesh right off the back of his hand. Blood was spraying everywhere as Sun Gilly collapsed. Sun Yun stared at the mangled, bloody mess of the boy's hand in horror. Sun Yun didn't take him to the hospital immediately. She didn't even dare to step outside. She was terrified of being discovered while hiding in my house. Instead, she rummaged through the storage room. She managed to find an old first aid kit. She pulled out the medicine and the bandages. Everything in that kit had expired a long time ago. Following a tutorial on her phone, she bandaged the brat's mangled hand. She was too panicked to notice the medicine was rotten. It wouldn't disinfect the wound or stop the bleeding at all. It would only make the injury fester and swell even worse. When she finally decided to settle the score with that snapping turtle, the clever beast had already vanished into the rock garden. The garden had a small fountain and thick ornamental plants for cover. The turtle was gone, and Sun Yun couldn't find it anywhere. I remembered how Sun Gilly destroyed my entire collection in my past life. He even used my entire house as his personal toilet. Seeing him bitten like this felt like pure, poetic karma. But this was just the beginning. I had plenty of other gifts waiting for them. When Sun Yun started making lunch, she began raiding my pantry for supplies. She found giant South American shrimp and French red wine. Or at least, they looked like it, along with various frozen fish and steaks. Sun Gilly started shouting without any restraint, "Make more. I love eating these, and I'm a growing boy, so I need the nutrients." He didn't think it was too much. In fact, he kept demanding more. He told Sun Yun to cook everything just because it looked expensive. In his mind, since he wasn't paying a cent, eating this was a total steal. "Fine, I'll prepare a bit more then," Sun Yun said. She got to work, reaching for my bottle of olive oil. She used it like it cost absolutely nothing. She just kept pouring and pouring it into the pan. Sun Gilly caught a whiff of a strange scent and nearly gagged. "Why does this oil smell so rancid?" he asked. Sun Yun didn't give it a second thought. "Olive oil always has a weird smell," she dismissed him. "It must be high quality. That's why the flavor is so strong." Once the food was on the table, Sun Gilly took a few bites. But the more he ate, the more he realized something was wrong. "This seafood smells off too, and look, it's turning black. Could all of this actually be rotten?" Sun Yun prepared a massive table full of food while everyone was starving. She took a few bites, but her sense of taste wasn't very sharp. To her, everything tasted perfectly normal, so she told the others it was fine. "It tastes okay to me, nothing is spoiled," she insisted, but Sun Wan refused to touch it. Instead, he just lowered his head and took huge gulps of that fake foreign liquor. Sun Yun figured he was just being dramatic again and ignored him. She just kept stuffing her face while Sun Gilly watched her eat happily. Since they were just kids and saw her eating, they decided to join in too. Before long, they had completely devoured the entire table of food. About half an hour later, the consequences hit. Both children started screaming about intense pains in their stomachs. They began running to the bathroom nonstop. Sun Wan, having downed all that fake alcohol on an empty stomach, was spinning. He kept shouting that he felt dizzy and wanted to vomit, his face bright red. Sun Yun wasn't doing much better herself as the toxins took hold. One moment her head was spinning, the next she was sprinting to the toilet. Finally, Sun Yun couldn't take the agony anymore. In the middle of the night, she hailed a taxi to rush the two kids to the hospital. Sun Wan's symptoms were milder, but he still spent the entire night with diarrhea. By the next morning, she was so exhausted she collapsed trying to stand up. I watched her struggle to get out of bed for the bathroom and laughed to myself. Sun Wan didn't crawl back to my house until sunset, looking completely defeated. She dragged her two kids along, who looked like they'd been through hell. Their bodies totally dehydrated from the constant diarrhea. The two sisters immediately rushed to the pantry to tear through my food supplies. They hadn't checked before, but now they realized every bottle of liquor was the same. Every single one was a fake, and all the food was long expired. Sun Wan slumped onto the sofa, cursing my name with what little strength she had left. "I thought he was a rich man, but his wine cellar is just a pile of junk," she spat. "It's all fakes. No wonder we felt like we were dying yesterday." Sun Yun chimed in, noting that the ingredients had expired ages ago. "No wonder my kids couldn't stop running to the toilet. This Wan Gao is unforgivable." Inside, I thought, if I weren't afraid of looking suspicious, I'd laugh in their faces. "We should make him pay every cent of our medical bills," Sun Wan growled. "Actually, there's an easier way to get our money back. He buys luxury goods. We'll just sneak in and take all his high-end designer items." Sun Wan immediately jumped on board with the plan to rob me blind. But whatever they were planning, I was already 10 steps ahead of them. I was prepared and waiting for the moment they stepped into my bedroom. The second Sun Yun opened the door, she gagged. "What is that smell?" The moment she stepped in, a repulsive stench hit her and forced her back. Everything was going exactly according to my plan. I had spent days piling up stinking socks and intentionally leaving them unwashed. That smell was basically a nuclear bomb of filth. Sun Wan couldn't take it, clutching her nose and retreating as far as possible. When Sun Yun finally forced herself inside to hunt for my luxury goods, she looked like she was searching through a toxic waste dump. Even with her nose covered, the stench was overpowering her senses. She was gagging so hard you'd think she was suffering from morning sickness. She fumbled through my closet, but couldn't find a single designer item. Suddenly, she felt something hairy and twitching brush against her skin. The sensation on her hand sent a jolt of pure terror through her. Sun Gilly, with her sharp eyes, spotted the intruder immediately. "Auntie, there's a huge spider crawling on your hand," she shrieked. Hearing the word spider, Sun Yun began shaking her hand in a blind panic. She thrashed her arm wildly, desperate to fling the black, hairy creature off. The spider, startled by the sudden movement, didn't just fall, it fought back. It sank its fangs into Sun Yun's finger before scurrying across the floor and vanishing. The lingering hairy sensation was enough to drive anyone insane. She stood there trembling and screaming, "Spider, stay away, I'm scared." Sun Wan didn't dare to get close to the room at all. He was too terrified to even peek inside from a distance. He held Sona back as she looked like she was about to die from the shock. He told her not to go in and cause more trouble just to see the show. Sun Gilly was so spooked by Sun Yun's miserable state that she started screaming, "I'm scared of spiders too, stay away from me." The two of them shrieked for a long time before Sun Gilly finally caught her breath. "Auntie, I think the spider is gone," she gasped out. Sun Yun's heavy, leaden legs finally started to obey her again. She bolted out of my room like her life depended on it, swearing she'd never step foot in there again. The surveillance footage showed a massive wet stain between her legs. She had literally peed herself. A little while later, Sun Jun called me, sounding incredibly hesitant. "I heard from a friend you started keeping pets. What kind are they?" He was fishing for info, desperate to know if they were poisonous or how many I had. I wasn't about to give him anything, so I just asked coldly, "Why do you care?" "Don't call me. You're bad luck," I snapped, and then I hung up on him. "Are they venomous? How many are there?" He can spend the rest of his life guessing. Sun Yun was gnashing her teeth in a blind rage, but there was nothing she could do. She was so shaken and consumed by fear that she couldn't let it go. She ended up spending 2,000 yuan at the hospital just to get in 4 drip for her nerves. She finally managed to calm down, but there was a problem. She had no idea how many spiders I actually had in the house. Now, she checks every single corner of every room she enters. She's constantly looking for a massive, hairy black spider lurking in the shadows. She's obsessed and paranoid all day long. No matter how much her older sister tried to convince her, she'd never step foot in my room again. She was too terrified to go back for her old belongings. She's convinced the spider is still in there, waiting to bite her again, so she begged Sun Wan to go in instead. Naturally, Sun Wan wasn't willing to do it either, snapping, "I'm not going in there." Sun Jun laughed bitterly and said, "If you won't go, why should I? Is my life worth nothing to you?" Only then did Sun Wan back down in embarrassment. They were too afraid of the neighbors seeing them during the day, so they didn't dare leave the villa. They were stuck, especially since everything in the pantry was inedible. Then they remembered, aren't there fish in the front yard pond? Sun Wan had seen plenty of large fish under the floating algae and suggested they catch some, which Sun Yun happily agreed to. It was New Year's Eve, and they planned to eat fish for lunch and dinner. They figured they'd sneak out for a big feast later and come right back. However, they immediately started arguing over who should actually get into the pond to catch them. Sun Yun had already been snapped at by a snapping turtle and bitten by a spider. Her hands were covered in wounds, and the pond water was freezing. To make matters worse, they didn't have any professional fishing gear. If they didn't get in the water, they weren't catching a thing, but Sun Wan didn't want to ruin her new dress in that stinking pond. Nearby, Sun Gilly was busy ripping up my flowers. She was tearing through my plants with excitement until she heard them talking. She suddenly volunteered, shouting that she wanted to catch some fish balls. "I'll go in," she yelled. Ignoring the fresh scabs on the back of her hand, she jumped straight into the pond. Now, piranhas don't usually attack animals much larger than themselves. Unless, of course, that animal is wounded and bleeding. Piranhas are incredibly sensitive to the scent of blood, and the moment they caught a whiff of Sun Gilly, they swarmed. They began relentlessly biting at the open wounds on her body. The intense pain and the sudden strikes terrified Sun Gilly, causing her to slip and fall face first into the water. She screamed in terror as she watched them tear at her flesh. This time, Sun Wan didn't give a damn about her expensive skirt. She reached out as fast as she could to grab Sun Gilly and pull her out of the pond. Unfortunately, Sun Gilly was too heavy for her to pull up with just one hand. "Sun Yun, get down here and help me pull her out," Sun Wan begged. "No way, I'm scared of those man-eating fish," Sun Yun cried back. Hearing those screams, Sun Yun completely lost his nerve and cowered away. He collapsed onto the ground, paralyzed with fear. Finally, Sun Wan used every ounce of strength she had to pull Sun Gilly out. The girl's hand was a bloody mess, with the bone clearly visible through the shredded skin. "My poor child, I'm taking you to the hospital right now," Sun Wan cried, her heart breaking. She reached for her phone to call an ambulance, but Sun Yun stopped her immediately. "No, if the paramedics come here, they'll know we broke into a private residence. Do you want to throw your career as an influencer away?" he hissed. He was more afraid of going to jail than his own niece losing her hand. But if Sun Gilly didn't get medical attention soon, she was going to be crippled for life. Sun Wan scrambled for a middle ground and dragged the pale, trembling girl toward the exit. Her plan was to get far away from the villa district before calling a taxi. That way, no one would ever know they had trespassed on my property. But she hadn't even made it past the gates when her phone rang again. It was Sun Yun, and he was hysterical. "Sister, something terrible has happened," he wailed through the receiver. "Dad broke into the study, and a massive python has him pinned. It's crushing him. He can't breathe. He's going to die. I'm too scared to go near it. Help me. Hearing that her father was being squeezed to death, Sun Wan's legs gave out and she fainted. Left with no other choice, a panicked Sun Yun finally called the police and an ambulance. All that arrogance she showed when she broke into my house was gone. When I finally got the call from the police, they told me a group had trespassed on my property while I was busy grilling meat in the yard. The officers reported that by the time they arrived, Sun Gillis' hand was so mangled that the doctors had to amputate it immediately. She was already in surgery and the rest of the family was a mess. The police had managed to rescue Sun Nully from the python's coils. He was babbling incoherently and shaking before a high fever took hold of him. Sun Wan was the only one who got off easy. She just fainted, but Sun Yun wasn't nearly as lucky. The series of horrors he witnessed drove him straight into a state of madness. Now he just talks nonsense to anyone who will listen. He screams about spiders and giant pythons, his mind clearly broken beyond repair. Once Sun Wan woke up, she suspected I knew they were coming all along. She claimed I planned the whole thing to hurt them and demanded I compensate them for their losses. When the police asked for my cooperation, I didn't even show up in person. I simply sent them the remote surveillance footage from my house over the last few days. I packaged it all up and handed it over to the authorities. One look at that video was all it took to see who was really at fault. The police stopped asking for my presence once they saw I had zero responsibility for their stupidity. I happen to keep a few fierce, non-venomous pets. Sure, they're a bit dangerous, but they stay inside my own property. If those idiots hadn't ignored the clear warning signs, the ones I hung right on my front gate, and if they hadn't broken in, nothing would have happened. Not a thing. This time, I'm not paying them a single cent in compensation. In fact, they're the ones who are going to pay me for damaging my belongings. I hired a lawyer immediately, and the negotiations were incredibly easy. I left Sun Wan's demands entirely in the hands of my legal counsel. I let the professionals handle the professional work. The next day, my lawyer told me that Sun Wan was still acting tough. She kept screaming that she'd sue me into bankruptcy, but my lawyer just laughed. He told me they were the ones at fault for trespassing, and I had fulfilled my duty. I gave them fair warning. The judge will likely declare me completely innocent. At most, I might pay a tiny humanitarian fee, but with my evidence, I'm not worried. Let them sue if they want. I'll be right there waiting for them. I told my lawyer to tell Sun Wan to bring it on whenever she's ready. Then, I took the surveillance footage and blurred out the faces. I leaked it online before Sun Wan could even try to play the victim for sympathy. I made sure the world saw their stupidity while keeping the identities obscured. Since Sun Wan is a minor internet celebrity with a very unique figure, it didn't take long for netizens to recognize her in the footage. A mob of users immediately swarmed her social media pages to tear her apart. Didn't you say you were filthy rich? A daughter of a wealthy family. How do you explain breaking into a private villa like a common thief? Those sisters are just gold diggers. Disgusting. They got exactly what they deserved. And they have the nerve to ask for compensation? They trashed the man's home. The internet was vilifying her, but for me, that wasn't nearly enough. I decided to leak the video of her ex-husband, Chen Den. I wanted the world to see him realize he'd been raising another man's children. The scandal exploded instantly. This time, I didn't even have to lift a finger to find him. He was already on the warpath. Sun Wan's ex-husband was blinded by pure rage. He drove like a madman that very same night. He stormed into the hospital wing where Sun Wan, Billy, and Sonnerly were all recovering. Public opinion spread faster than a wildfire after I dropped that clip. The surveillance caught Sun Wan admitting the twins weren't biologically his. In just one night, the view count shattered every record on the platform. The comment section was overflowing with people who lived for the drama. Someone even leaked the identity of Sun Wan's ex-husband, Solon. He owned a construction materials company and had built a massive fortune. He was famous for his love of luxury and showing off his life. He used to post photos of the twins constantly, bragging about the family genes. Now, every single one of those posts had become a national joke. I turned off my phone and took a quick shower. The main event had finally started. As the director of this masterpiece, I couldn't miss the finale. I wanted to hear the crash in person. I threw on a black trench coat that made me look like someone you don't cross. I drove straight to the municipal hospital. I hadn't even reached the orthopedic ward when I heard the screaming. Sun Wan's shrieks were piercing, punctuated by the sound of glass shattering. Solon, let me explain. Those videos are fakes. It was Wang Gao. That bastard framed me to get revenge. The hallway was packed with patients and families watching the chaos unfold. The head nurse was drenched in sweat, unable to break through the crowd. I pushed my way through until I found a spot with a perfect view. The hospital room was a complete disaster zone. Solon was shaking with rage, the veins in his neck bulging as he gripped and forced stand like a weapon. Sun Wan was on her knees with her hair a mess, desperately clinging to him. She wouldn't let go of Solon's leg, her face, usually so carefully maintained, now unrecognizable. It was swollen like a piece of fermented dough, a bloated mess from the beating she'd clearly just taken. On the hospital bed, Sun Gilly was still unconscious after his amputation surgery. In the other bed, Sonnerly was wailing, cowering under the sheets in terror. As for my ex-girlfriend, Sun Yun, she was curled up in the corner staring blankly at the ceiling. She was muttering incoherently to herself about spiders. Big, terrifying spiders. They're deep fakes, Solin, Sun Won screamed, trying to lie her way out of it. Furious, Solin kicked her off him and shouted, videos can be faked, but DNA can't. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of medical reports. He slammed them into Sun Won's face, sending the white papers fluttering across the floor. The moment I saw those videos last night, I didn't just sit around, he roared. I ordered emergency tests using the hair and toothbrushes you left at my house. Look at the results yourself. Those two bastards don't have a drop of my blood. Solin's voice was so loud it echoed through the entire floor of the hospital. I've been raising someone else's kids for 8 years, paying $20,000 a month in support. I even bought you a house and a car while you paraded around and played me for a fool. Sun Won stared down at the paternity test results, her face turning ghostly pale. She collapsed onto the floor right then and there. She didn't have a single ounce of strength left to argue. Trembling, she reached out and tugged on Solin's pant leg. We were husband and wife, she sobbed. Even if the kids aren't yours, we had feelings. Gilly's hand is ruined and he needs money for treatment. You can't just abandon us. Solin recoiled in disgust, looking at her like she was a pile of filth. I'm here for 3 things, he said, holding up 3 fingers with a terrifying glare. First, that house in your name. I paid the down payment and every mortgage installment. My lawyer is already filing for a prejudgment attachment on the property. So get out, immediately. Second, I want every cent of child support I've paid over the last 8 years back. That includes the $5 million I gave you as a breakup settlement. I'm suing for unjust enrichment and fraud. I'm not just taking the money, I'm putting you in prison. Third, Solin paused, his eyes drifting coldly toward the 2 children in the beds. There wasn't a trace of his former affection left in his gaze. There was only deep, soul-crushing loathing. I won't pay another penny for these bastards' medical bills. I just withdrew the $50,000 deposit. Hearing that, Sun Won let out a desperate, piercing scream. No, Solin, you can't. Gilly's follow-up surgery costs over 10,000 yuan. If you take that money, the hospital will stop his treatment. You're killing my children. Are they going to die? Am I forcing them to die? I let out a cold sneer and straightened the lapels of my suit. What does that have to do with me? Go find their real father, that thug. With those final words, I turned my back to leave. Sun Won lunged at me like a feral animal, but my bodyguard stepped in. He shoved her back so hard she slammed into the nightstand, splitting her forehead open. I stood by the wide-open door, watching the chaos unfold. After enjoying the show long enough, I began to clap slowly. Excellent, truly excellent. The sound of my applause cut through the room like a knife. Every head in the room snapped toward me. Sun Won clutched her head, blood streaming down her face and into her mouth. She looked like a literal demon as she turned her pure, unadulterated hatred toward me. She let out a guttural scream and prepared to spring. This is all your fault. You ruined my life. You destroyed my family. I'm going to kill you. Before she could reach me, I stepped aside with a slight, effortless movement. I dropped her with a single kick and looked down at her trembling body. Your life is a disaster because you're a greedy, unfaithful mess. You broke into my home with your entire family. How is any of this my fault? I saw a flicker of relief in Zhou Lin's eyes, mixed with a trace of complicated gratitude. After all, none of this would have happened if it weren't for my video. Zhou Lin patted my shoulder as he walked past and muttered, Thanks, brother. Even if you aren't exactly a saint, I consider this a favor owed. I chuckled and replied, Don't mention it, President Zhou. I'm just protecting my rights. With her benefactor gone, Sun Won's final hope vanished into thin air. She collapsed onto the floor, wailing in utter disgrace. On the hospital bed, Sonnerly was crying so hard, he looked like he was about to convulse. In the corner, Sun Yun was still clawing at the air like a madman. It was as if he were fighting off a swarm of invisible spiders. The onlookers began to point and whisper, calling her a gold digger who got what she deserved. They gossiped about how she'd be drowning in debt once the child support lawsuits hit. I didn't leave yet. Instead, I walked over to Sun Won and knelt down beside her. Stop crying and save your energy, I whispered coldly. I've already had my lawyer calculate the damages you caused to my home. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a long, folded list. I waved it slowly in front of her tear-streaked face. The expensive wine they drank, the gourmet food they gorged on, the antique vases they smashed, the luxury carpets they ruined, and most importantly, my destroyed models. The total comes to 3.6 million. Sun Won snapped her head up, her eyes bulging out of her head. 3.6 million? Are you insane? She shrieked. You think those little plastic dolls are worth that much? I looked at her coldly and said, Plastic dolls. Those were discontinued JK limited editions, priceless and irreplaceable. I've already hired a professional appraisal agency to evaluate the damage. The court will uphold it, even if you don't have a cent to your name. I let my voice trail off and leaned in close to her ear. I whispered so only the two of us could hear. I heard your ex is back. You know, the biological father of those 2 kids? He just got out of prison. What would he do if he found out he had a rich ex-girlfriend? Sun Won's pupils contracted violently, and her entire body began to shake. She knew exactly who that man was. He was her living nightmare. A total disaster of a human being. A leech you can never shake off once he hooks you. She had fought so hard to dump him back, then just to trick Zhou Lin into taking over. What do you want? She stammered, her voice thick with terror. She looked more afraid now than when she was facing Zhou Lin's wrath. I stood up and brushed the non-existent dust off my clothes. Nothing much, I said. I just believe that the most important thing for a family is to be together. And since President Zhou doesn't want these kids, their father should. Someone has to step up and take responsibility as a father, right? Wang Gao, you're not human. You're a demon. Sun Quan screamed in despair. I ignored the insults hurled at my back and turned away. I walked out of the hospital room, leaving behind the smell of disinfectant and the air of hopelessness. I made my way through the hospital doors and stepped outside. The sunlight was blindingly bright. I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, and dialed a specific number. It was the contact I had tracked down earlier. Hello? Is this Ao Kamaru? Kian, I said, my voice dripping with fake enthusiasm. I heard you're looking for a way to make a fortune. I have some great news for you regarding your old flame, Sun Quan. Not only can you get your 2 kids back for free, but you can walk away with a massive payday too. A raspy, greedy voice answered from the other end. I could hear the background noise of a crowded mahjong parlor. For real, brother? Who is this? Who I am doesn't matter, I replied coldly. What matters is that Sun Quan is at the municipal hospital right now, trauma ward room 3. If you're late, you might miss out on your big chance. After all, someone else might swoop in and steal that money first. I hung up the phone and stared at the traffic light in the distance. As the signal flickered, a cold smirk played on the corner of my lips. Sun Quan, Sunyu, did you really think this was over? You thought it was the end, but this is only the beginning. Since you love getting things for free and playing people for fools, I'll give you what you want. I'm sending you a massive gift. The rabid dogs are out of their cages and coming for their family. I wasn't in any rush to leave, so I took a seat in the hospital waiting room. I bought a hot coffee and sipped it calmly, savoring the moment. About 20 minutes passed. Suddenly, a massive commotion broke out at the main entrance. A man appeared in a stained shirt, tight jeans, and a face slick with grease. A cheap dragon tattoo was visible on his shoulder. He stormed in cursing, followed by 2 thugs with bleached blonde hair. They were typical street-level lowlifes, and the leader was none other than Sa Qiang. I pulled the brim of my cap lower and watched the 3 of them. I watched the rabid dogs head straight for the elevators with practiced ease. On the phone earlier, I hadn't just told him I didn't want to talk. I had very kindly given him the exact floor and room number. I pulled out my phone again and connected to the local network. I activated the small Bluetooth earpiece I had hidden earlier. I'd accidentally dropped it right in front of the hospital room door. Suddenly, a satisfying noise crackled through the receiver. Bam! The sound confirmed the hospital room door had been forced open. It was kicked in with a single blow. Which one of you is Sun Quan? Get your ass out here right now. Xiao Qiang's raspy voice echoed instantly. Next, I heard the sound of furniture being shoved aside. Then came Sun Wan's terrified scream. Xiao Qiang, how did you get here? Who told you where we were? Cut the crap, Xiao Qiang shouted, clearly out of patience. I heard you gave that old man 2 bastards and squeezed 5 million yuan out of him. You got it from your ex-husband, right? Hand it over. I'm broke. Go away. Get out. I don't have any money, she shrieked, followed by a sharp slap. The sound was crisp through my earpiece. A heavy thud. Even my own face stung just hearing it. I just got out of prison and my luck is trash. You're telling me you have no money. That gold chain around your neck looks pretty heavy. Take it off. The hospital room descended into pure chaos in an instant. Sun Quan was wailing, and the sound of things being snatched away filled the air. This is the last thing of value I have. You can't take it. Dolly needs surgery. To hell with his surgery. Xiao Qiang roared. I think this kid is missing a hands. Even if he grows up, he'll be useless. Better to get rid of him now and save the trouble. But this kid looks decent enough. Maybe he can go dash. Begging with the old man later on. He might even make us dash some real money. Hearing those words, I couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. This was the true love Sun Quan chose. She risked her life to give birth to that man's child back then. To her, I was just a fool to exploit, while Xiao Qiang was a real man. Well, now her real man was teaching her a lesson. Don't touch my son. Xiao Qiang, you're a beast. Get out. A flurry of punches and kicks followed, accompanied by Sun Wan's muffled groans of pain. Then there was Sun Young, who was already losing her mind. She didn't react how I expected. Maybe she was terrified by Xiao Qiang's ferocity, or maybe it was just an instinctive reaction. Suddenly, her body began to twitch and shift. She screamed, "Spiders! Huge black spiders are going to bite you to death. They're going to kill you." She grabbed the thermos of water off the table and hurled it. It flew toward Xiao Qiang and shattered with a deafening crash. Scalding water sprayed everywhere. It drenched Xiao Qiang, burning him. "Who is this crazy bitch?" he roared, furious that she dared to splash him. "Me? You splash me? Brothers dash. Beat her until she gives up." At that moment, the hospital room turned into a living hell. For Sun Quan and Sun Young, this was the playground they deserved. They used to be invincible, the sisters who strutted and looked down on me. Now they were being pummeled by 3 thugs, unable to fight back. The nurse and security guard arrived quickly, but they froze when they saw him. Xiao Qiang was a fresh ex-con, and no one dared to face him. They just stood at the door, screaming for the police. "I'm just beating my wife and kids. It's a family matter," he yelled. "Let the cops come. What can they even do to me?" He was right. In many cases like this, these domestic disputes are a headache for the police, usually ending in a few days of detention. And for a man like Xiao Qiang, prison wasn't a punishment. It was just a free hotel. I listened to their fading screams through my headphones. knowing the breaking point was close. This masterpiece of dog eats dog was reaching its climax. It didn't just destroy Sun Wan's mental defenses, it stripped away every last shred of their dignity in this city. They had no way left to survive. I took off my headphones and tossed them into a trash can. I didn't care where they landed. I stood up and walked out of the hospital. In a cafe across the street, a man in a sharp suit was waiting. He wore gold-rimmed glasses and sat by the window, silently reviewing his screen. He flipped through the documents with elegance. His name was Lee, a top-tier criminal law expert. He was also the star lawyer I hired with a massive salary. His motto was simple: as long as the money is right, he can find a loophole in anything. He could find a flaw in the king of hell's own ledger of life and death. I sat down across from him and said, "Sorry for the wait, Lawyer Lee." He adjusted his glasses, flashing a professional, razor-sharp smile. "Mr. Wong, I've reviewed all the materials you sent over," he began. "It's perfect. This isn't just a civil grievance anymore. I'm certain we can turn this into a full-blown criminal case." He pushed several thick documents toward me across the table. "First, we have illegal trespassing," he said, pointing to the files. "The security footage shows them forcing the lock and changing it themselves. They stayed there for an extended period, proving clear malicious intent. Second, we have the crime of grand theft. They secretly sold your luxury items, drank your expensive wine, and ate high-end ingredients. Based on the damage assessment, the total value is astronomical. Wouldn't that alone carry a 10-year sentence?" I asked coldly. "Third, intentional destruction of property," he continued, ignoring my interruption. "Those collectibles and antique vases they smashed are worth a fortune." Lee's fingers tapped rhythmically on the table, like he was playing a song. It sounded like a funeral march for the Sun sisters. "As for the child's injury, you placed warning signs and cameras at the door. You don't have to take any responsibility. On the contrary, we can countersue them. We'll go after them for negligence in supervision. Their actions caused your pet to panic, and that's why it became such a hero. The entire pond's ecosystem was disrupted because of them." I felt a wave of relief. This is what true professionalism looks like. I added, "The man we just saw, Xiao Chong, is the biological father of those two kids. He just stole the last of Sun Wan's jewelry from the hospital room. He even beat them up right there in the ward, and I think we can use that too." Lawyer Lee's eyes lit up, a golden glint flashing behind his lenses as he smiled. "If we prove Xiao Chong is an accomplice or a theft suspect, this fire will burn even hotter." He pulled out a thick, heavy stack of legal documents. He laid the lawsuit out in front of me and handed me a pen. "Mr. Wong, everything is ready. I just need your signature, and this lawsuit goes to the court immediately. We will also submit everything to the public security organs. I'll request an immediate preservation of assets to freeze their finances. Every single account in their names will be locked down. I'll ensure they are restricted from leaving the country. Given the massive amount of money involved in this case, they'll be moving from that hospital room to a detention center cell very soon." I picked up the pen, staring at its sharp tip, and signed my name without a second thought. I stood up and shook the lawyer's hand, knowing money was the least of my concerns. The legal fees didn't matter to me. I only had one single request. I want them to rot in prison and learn that some people should never be provoked. Lee nodded with a cold, confident smile, promising to be the professional hunter I needed. As I stepped out of the cafe, I saw several police cars with flashing lights at the hospital. But I knew those officers weren't there to help Song Wan out of her mess. They were there to put her in handcuffs. The more chaos Xiao Chong caused upstairs, the worse it would get for Song Wan. The police were about to discover the Song sisters were behind a massive robbery case. Just imagining that scene made me smirk. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony of it all. "Song Wan, you think you've finally found a lifeline to save you. But you're about to realize that lifeline is actually a noose." I wondered, what kind of face will you make when the trap snaps shut? Suddenly, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a notification from the property management office. They sent a message regarding the crowd gathering at the estate. "Mr. Wong, there is a large group of people who don't understand how society works, and they have all gathered right in front of your villa. They claim to be relatives of the injured boy. They've even unfurled a massive banner demanding justice. The news is already spreading like a pandemic across the internet. They're broadcasting live, which means Song Wan hasn't given up yet. She's still trying to use technology to her advantage. She's using public opinion as her absolute last resort. She's putting on a performance, but there's one thing she doesn't realize. In the eyes of netizens now, she stopped being a poor single mother a long time ago. She's a complete laughingstock, but I don't care. I want them to make the biggest scene possible, because my lawyer's letter is coming for her. The police arrest warrant will be the perfect grand finale for her little live stream." As I drove back to the villa, I saw a massive crowd swarming my front gate from a distance. Dozens of bottom-feeding media outlets were there, desperate for clicks with their mics and cameras. Influencers were everywhere, streaming from their phones around a giant white banner. The black letters screamed, "Heartless tycoon raises wild beasts that maul people. Heaven will not allow this." Under the banner stood Song Wan, her head wrapped in thick bandages and her face covered in bruises. She was sobbing hysterically into the camera, begging for justice. She pointed toward my house, her voice cracking with fake agony. "It was deliberate," she wailed. "He keeps man-eating fish and pythons in his house just to hurt people. My son is only 8 years old, and they've torn his hand off. He's unconscious in the hospital, and this man won't even pay the medical bills. Her performance was Oscar-worthy, making me realize how blind I was when we dated. But now, she was claiming I wanted her entire family dead. She screamed to the cameras that this was murder, cold-blooded murder. Zhao Qian wasn't sitting idle either, clearly treating this like a business opportunity. He stood there shirtless, flaunting his tattoos and swinging an iron bar against my gate. The heavy thuds echoed as he called me a coward and told me to come out. Don't think your money makes you superior, he roared at the livestream audience. If you don't pay me 10 million today, I'll grind this shitty house to dust. The comments on the livestream were scrolling by at a frantic pace. Self-righteous netizens were calling me a monster and demanding I go to prison. I watched the chaotic scene unfold from inside my car. Instead of getting angry, I actually started to smile. My lawyer, Li San, adjusted his glasses from the passenger seat and looked out the window. Mr. Wang, it seems they are practically begging for a prison sentence, he noted calmly. Illegal assembly, extortion, and harassment, not even God can save them now. Well then, I said, let's not keep our audience waiting any longer. I threw the car door open and stepped out as 4 more cars pulled up behind me. The police were following me closely, their red and blue lights flashing. The strobes cut through the twilight, shattering the darkness of the street. Officers stepped out, moving with purpose. They cleared a path with an authoritative shout that silenced the mob. The rowdy crowd went quiet in an instant. Seeing such a large number of officers arrive took the wind out of their sails. The influencers holding their phones high began to back away in fear. When Songwan saw me, a flash of panic crossed her eyes. But it was quickly replaced by a look of pure greed. She probably thought the police were here because of public pressure. She thought they were here to arrest me. It's him, Songwan screamed, pointing her finger directly at me. He's the one who hurt my son. Arrest him right now. Zhao Qian slammed his iron bar against the ground and stumbled toward me. Finally showing your face? If you're smart, you'll hand over the cash now. Or else what? I asked, looking at him with cold indifference. I didn't stop walking. I headed straight toward the center of the chaos. Countless cameras were pointed directly at my face. I didn't dodge them. Instead, I leaned into one of the live streams. I flashed a perfect, standard smile and said, "Good evening, everyone. Let's settle the score." I was going to settle it in front of the entire internet. I stepped aside and signaled to the man standing behind me. He was carrying a sleek briefcase. He stepped forward with an air of absolute confidence. I am Li San, the legal representative for Mr. Wang Hao. His voice wasn't loud, but every word was sharp and professional. He pulled a document with a bright red seal from his briefcase. He held it up to the cameras, detailing the illegal trespassing case against Song Wan. The police have officially opened an investigation into Song Wan and her relatives. Song Wan's wailing stopped dead in its tracks. Her face turned pale as she stammered. "You're lying. I'm his girlfriend." "How can an ex-girlfriend be a trespasser?" she shrieked, but I cut her off. "You broke in after I explicitly refused you entry and changed the locks. You hired a locksmith to force your way in, and the security cameras caught everything." Li Sun continued, "Under Article 245, illegal trespassing carries up to 3 years in prison. But that's just the appetizer," he said, pulling out a second document. It was a long, detailed list of property damages and theft. During your illegal stay, you stole and sold fine liquors worth 1.2 million yuan. You also destroyed limited edition collectibles and antiques worth 3.6 million yuan. The total came to 4.8 million, a massive sum that carries a minimum 10-year sentence. 8 million yuan. This isn't an ex-girlfriend drama. It's a home invasion and robbery. She broke in by force and squatted there for 20 days, yet she expects compensation. What kind of bandit logic is this? Who was it that just said the naughty kid was innocent? He smashed collectibles worth millions. He got exactly what he deserved. Song Wan was shaking uncontrollably, never expecting I'd actually call the police and track every cent. She looked at Zhao Chong in a panic and whimpered, "Brother Chong, what do we do?" Zhao Chong's eyes bulged when he heard the figure of 4.8 million. But he was ignorant of the law and a complete reckless fool. He didn't think about prison. He only saw that I actually had that much money to my name. Zhao Chong flew into a rage, wildly swinging the iron bar in his hand. He pointed it at me and screamed, "I don't give a damn about your toys. My son's arm is broken. If you don't give me the money today, I'll kill you." He actually tried to attack me in front of the cops. "Don't move. Drop the weapon." The police were already on high alert and moved the second he lunged. 3 tactical officers pounced on him instantly. "Get off me." Zhao Chong struggled desperately. But against professional takedown techniques, his street brawler skills were useless. There was a loud crack as his arm was twisted back, and the cold handcuffs snapped shut. The officer in charge stepped forward and looked down at him coldly. "Zhao Chong, right? We just received a report from the hospital. You're charged with assault, theft, and extortion. And now, we're adding attacking an officer with a deadly weapon. Take him away." As they dragged him to the cruiser, he kept screaming about his natural right to be paid. Breaking and entering, plus robbery. She was now formally under criminal arrest. The cold handcuffs snapped shut around Song Wan's wrists. In that moment, she finally realized she was finished and started sobbing. "No, don't arrest me." She looked at me, her eyes filled with desperate pleading, and cried out my name. "Wang Hao, I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have gone to your house. Please, Please, tell the police something. It's a misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding. If I go to jail, what will happen to Dolly and Early? She wailed, but I felt absolutely nothing. I leaned down, looked her in the eye, and reminded her of every bottle of wine she drank. I reminded her how she destroyed the fruits of my hard work and tried to steal my home. Did she really think she could just call it a misunderstanding now? As for the children, I leaned in closer to her ear. I whispered, don't worry, the government has social welfare institutions for them. Compared to parents like you who destroy their values, an orphanage might be their best fate. I stood up and waved my hand dismissively, like I was shooing away a fly. Two female officers dragged Song Wan toward the police cruiser. Her screams gradually faded, finally disappearing into the night air. The police cars sped away, taking all the noise and chaos with them. Only a mess remained at the villa entrance, while the neighbors stood there in stunned silence. Lawyer Lee adjusted his glasses while checking the data on his phone and looked at me. Mr. Wong, public opinion online has completely flipped. Your performance just now was perfect. The top trending topic was now my masterclass response to moral kidnapping. I glanced at my phone and saw the live stream was still going, but I was done watching. I told Lawyer Lee to handle the rest and looked at my villa, familiar, yet suddenly strange. It had been violated, but at least it was finally clean of those people. I made it clear I wouldn't accept any settlement or sign any letters of leniency. I wanted the maximum sentence, and Lawyer Lee bowed slightly, confirming he understood. I'll make sure they rot in prison while spending the rest of their lives paying back that $4.8 million. I turned and walked into the courtyard, noticing the pool had already been drained. The piranhas that did such a great job had already been taken away by my friends. But as I stared into the empty basin, I realized something was missing. It was completely hollow, and it seemed like the chaos had finally vanished. I could still see Song Wan's terrified face as she fell, but was it really over? No, I still had one more gift to deliver to Song Jun, who was currently playing the insanity card. He was faking a mental breakdown in the psychiatric hospital to avoid consequences. They say that now, every time he closes his eyes, he sees spiders crawling everywhere. Fine then, I'll show him what a real spiderweb looks like.